not quite there yet. It is there now. Ruth.
Hi.
Welcome to Rethink Work, and your talk today is a really good, very relevant rethink that is probably ongoing. So I'm looking forward to this. Certainly a lot of my clients are working through how do we tackle this silo working, this collaboration working in a hybrid world. Really looking forward to it. So I'm going to hand over.
Great. Thank you very much. So yes, today I'm going to be focusing on sort of collaboration and tackling silo working in the hybrid world. I would like to say thank you to anyone who came along for the 80s film references. I will try and fit one more in at least before the end, but I can't make any promises. I'm going to talk a little bit about collaboration and the cross-team working, and then I'm going to share a little bit about what I'm seeing with people that I'm working with at the moment, some of the things that are working, and hopefully that will be helpful. So I wanted to start by thinking about what drives success in the workplace. And there are various things that we sort of think drive our career progression, how successful, how content we feel at work. But for me, really the thing that for most of us makes the biggest difference to how we feel about our work and how able we are to achieve what we want is how we work with our colleagues and the people around us. So I remember about 10, 12 years ago when I got my first senior management role. I was made head of department for quite a large team, and I was given a really big, juicy change project to work on. Obviously, I was a little bit nervous going into that role, so I was really focused on trying to do the best that I could. So I went out and I read, all the books, all the blogs on marketing, everything I could find out about branding. I made sure that I was up with all the latest newfangled technologies, such as Twitter and RSS feeds, very big at the time. And I was also took very seriously my responsibilities of leading a team. So I went out and I read all the books on leadership, and I thought about how to be inspirational and how to support people. And that was all great. But about 3 or 4 months in, it became really clear to me that what I needed to succeed in that role was not the technical knowledge, and it wasn't necessarily about how I was leading my team. To make that change project work, I needed to go and speak to the CEO and the board and get them on board with what I was trying to do. I needed to be able to motivate and persuade the sort of skeptics in my team that it was worth doing. But even more so, I needed to go out and work with my peers across the organisation to really understand what was going on for them and what they needed from this project and what it needed to do to make it work for them. It wasn't just about selling it to them, I realised. It was about really making sure that it met their needs and learning from what they could tell me about what was going on. So that was a really important lesson to me that I took on into other roles as I carried on sort of in the world of work. I'm not a senior leader anymore. Now I work for myself, but I still am very focused on relationships and how people work together and collaboration. So I really think that that is at the heart of what drives success in the workplace. And I often come back to this quote because I think this is so true, and so much at the heart of what I'm trying to get at today, is that you need to have relationships big enough to get the work done. This is a quote from a guy called Steve Radcliffe, who has written some really useful stuff around leadership, and just recognizing that all of that relationship building, working together, collaboration is not an add-on to your job, particularly as a leader. It is your job. It is part of the role, and you can't ignore it. And we know collaboration is good overall. There has been research that shows that organisations with a collaborative culture are 5 times more likely to be high performing. There's also a lot of evidence around morale and that employees are more likely to feel valued and motivated if there are good working relationships, which makes sense to us, doesn't it? I think if I think back on difficult roles that I've had, and certainly when I'm coaching one-to-one clients, the stuff that really can pull people down in terms of stress and morale is when it's difficult to work with people, when relationships are strained, when when you feel like you're pushing water uphill trying to get things through. So there's a big impact on morale. And we also know that collaboration is great for creativity and for having lots of different voices coming in on a project will add to the quality of what's put out. You see organisations like Pixar are famous for bringing as many people together as possible to feed into a project to make sure that it's really as good as it can be. And a lot of EDI initiatives really recognise this now, that the more people and the more voices you can get to put in on something, the better the output is likely to be. There's also a big factor in collaboration around managing risk, because the more people you have involved, the more you can eliminate blind spots. So for me, when I was doing that rebrand project, it was really important to recognise what some of the things were that we needed to make sure we were covering off. We wanted to launch an online support group, which seemed, a bit of a no-brainer. Everything's digital. We need to get an online group going. But being able to go and speak to the services team about what some of the risks involved might be with service users was really helpful in eliminating some quite major risks that we had going on. But we know that hybrid working is making it easier for silos to develop. There isn't a lot of research on this, but what is out there is showing that, it's easier for people to start feeling more detached when they're working at home and not working directly with colleagues. So there are different types of silos that can develop in an organisation. There's obviously the team silos that you see, but also you sometimes see geographical silos or sort of social group silos. And what we're seeing with hybrid working is that there's more potential for a kind of working location silos to develop alongside team one. So you see a divide between people who are in the office and people who are at home. I also hear a lot from people about how working remotely can make them feel more detached from other teams because the work becomes a little bit more transactional. So people are sort of focused on their to-do list, what they've got to get through today. So you will hear people say, well, I've just got the meetings to get the work on my to-do list done. And to go and speak to somebody else in a different team about something they're working on is not my priority, or it's not in front of me, or I've just got to focus on my to-do list. People also talk about meetings becoming a little bit more transactional in terms of if you're going into an online meeting, well, here's the agenda, we're going to work through this today, and there isn't maybe that kind of chit chat that you would have had before a meeting or after a meeting where you find out how someone's going, or you maybe get a chance to ask them about that other side issue that you haven't picked up with them yet. I was talking to a client recently who said that she had been really trying very hard to improve relations with another team in her organisation, sort of recognising that was an important thing, but it had just been so difficult to get a time in a busy diary to speak to her counterpart in that team, and that when they were in meetings together, it just felt very much like they had to run through the things that needed to be decided that day. But then one day when she was working in the office, they ran into each other on the bus and managed to have a really productive chat in that 5 minutes to the office about covering off a lot of things that had been around the edges. So there's something we lose in remote working in terms of that spontaneous connection with people. That said, I think it's really important to be clear that I think hybrid working is a good thing overall. I think we're seeing loads of evidence that it really helps people have a better work-life balance, work-life integration. Obviously, it can save people a lot of money if they're not commuting every day. And we're seeing that, that it's better for people's well-being. So I don't think we can put the genie back in the bottle. Hybrid working is here to stay. It's just recognising that alongside the benefits that hybrid brings, there are potential pitfalls and things we need to watch out for. And for me, the main one of those is around teams in different parts of an organisation not working together and not communicating and not having those spontaneous connections that you might get over the kettle when you're making a cup of tea. So the question becomes, how do we address that so that we can make hybrid working work better for everyone? And I think it's important to recognise that collaboration isn't just a sort of magic thing that happens or doesn't happen. It's something that, as an organisation, as a leadership team, as anyone who's sort of interested in the culture of an organisation, we need to really think about how we make it happen and how we set those expectations. And I think particularly in the hybrid world, it's slightly different from the old office environment, where a lot of stuff would happen by watching and learning. I think particularly people sort of early on in their careers learned so much from just watching how things are done around here, which is essentially what culture is, isn't it? So you could see how your manager would talk to other managers. You could see that there was an expectation of collaborating with other people. And people don't have that in the same way, because when you're working at home alone, you're losing a lot of the context that goes with organisational culture. So I think it's really important that organisations recognise this and are really clear about the expectations that you have for your people, and that this, collaboration is a bit of their work. It's not another time-consuming thing that you need to add on top of doing the actual work of, writing your reports. It is your work. It is a big part of what you want to see people doing, because it really boosts morale and performance. So there is definitely a piece for the leadership team, I think, around clear expectations and, modelling the behaviour that you want to see. But I think there's also a piece about individual responsibility. And I think people at all levels of an organisation need to recognise the responsibility that they have to build relationships, to collaborate, to speak to other people around the organisation, to kind of know what is happening as a whole, rather than just in their team. I think it's really interesting. I was working with a senior management team recently where the sort of exec team recognised that a lot of the senior managers in the organisation had become so focused on, from all the right places, supporting their own teams and working on what their teams were doing. They had begun to speak about their employer as a separate entity, or, we I'll call it the sofa company, or the sofa company keeps doing this, or the sofa company keeps doing that. And, the CEO was just trying to say to them, you are the sofa company. The experience that people have working in this organisation is down to what you do. The experience that you have working in this organisation is down to you. Even more so when you're mostly based at home, you are responsible for creating the culture that you want to see. And then finally, there is something around making sure that people have the skills and are able to demonstrate the behaviours that boost collaboration. And again, we're not born with these. They're skills that we learn and develop throughout our careers. And if people are working remotely, it's more important that you might need to talk to them about this in a more formal way, rather than just letting them sit back and watch what other people do. So there's a really important piece for me around what are the skills and behaviours that we need to see to tackle silos and promote collaboration. So these are the things that I think hybrid workers need to be thinking about in order to succeed. And I think there's a really important behaviour around curiosity and promoting that as part of an organisational culture. So rather than focusing on your own inbox, what's going on, trying to foster an atmosphere of being curious about what other people are doing, what's happening in the outside world, looking up and out as much as we can. I think coaching skills are brilliant here if you're encouraging people to ask open questions, listen to other people, go out and try and find out more. It's a behaviour that underpins really good cross-team working. There's another piece about connection, and I think that's about a human connection that goes beyond doing the work together. And this would happen quite naturally, I think, in a lot of office situations where, as I said, you've got that queue for the microwave where everyone's heating their soup up at lunch, that you don't have anymore. So it's looking for opportunities to build that human connection. And I think that's why hybrid is great, because you can focus on how we do that within the office days that people have. I mean, the biggest complaint I get from people is, I don't want to go into the office to sit on Teams all day. If I'm going into the office, I want it to be to do something different. So how can you make sure that if you are having office days and shared office days, you're using it to promote connection? Are you having sort of social events for people? If your team is largely remote, I know some companies have tried things like having sort of drop-in coffee and a chat with someone in a different team. So there's no agenda, but you just sort of have a random meeting at 3 o'clock on a Tuesday with someone from a different team, where you talk to them about what they're doing, but also find out more about them as a person. So thinking about the things you can do to boost human connection. I think there's something about communication, and there's two sides to that. There is the side where we are talking about the practicalities. And again, this is stuff that we need to be so much more explicit about, because there isn't that context in a hybrid world. So what channels are you asking people to use for what? Speaking to someone about emails and how emails can now come through, and it feels like every email needs to be answered immediately, because people know that you're kind of at your desk. Whereas, the person I was speaking to was saying, whereas before I was in the office, people could see that I wasn't at my desk all day, I was in meetings, so they knew not to expect a response. So being explicit about, if it's urgent, what are you going to do? Call somebody, send a Teams message. Which channels are you using for kind of social connection versus work connection? So there's the practical thing around communication, but there's also a skills thing about helping people to have open, honest, courageous, constructive conversations, particularly when things are difficult. I mean, obviously those are skills that have always been really useful in the working world, but I think there's something about how to have those in a hybrid way. The one thing people tell me they absolutely hate is the message they get in a Teams channel saying, oh, can we have a chat later? And it just, sends their hearts sinking. So I think there's something about communication and how we manage conflict and how we deal with that in an environment where we maybe not seeing people face to face. Again, people talk to me about how conflict can kind of drag on longer because there isn't the opportunity to just sort of see each other face to face and say hello in a lift, And then finally, collaboration, and true collaboration in the sense of having, really clear shared purpose as an organisation that kind of moves across teams, encouraging people to take a sort of task-orientated approach to problem solving rather than, focusing on politics or relationships, really trying to foster that sense of we're all in this together. Those are the things that from my conversations with various people, I am feeling and seeing as most useful. So as part of my work, I go out and I work with organisations. I offer some training, workshops, coaching around kind of doing this people stuff and doing it in a hybrid world. And I wanted to share kind of my final reflection with you from what I'm seeing is that I'm afraid, there is no golden bullet at the moment on this. I think we're seeing a lot of talk about hybrid at the moment, and I think a lot of the debate is frustratingly shallow about what is good and bad about hybrid. A lot of it just talks about productivity. And if you're talking about productivity in terms of how much you can write in a day or how much data you can input into a spreadsheet, then maybe that's great. But I think there's also this piece about the quality of what we're churning out. And if we're going to do hybrid, and broadly I think we should, it's the biggest shift to our working environment since the internet came in, fundamentally changing the way we work. And what is best and how we make that work for teams and cross-team working and co-working and relationships at work is going to differ as much from team to team as it will from organisation to organisation. There are a lot of factors here. So it's too late to ask whether we should be doing hybrid, but there's definitely a question to be asked about how we do it well. And we're in a transition point. Life moves pretty fast, so we're still working this stuff out. But I think some of that, it's about translating some of the stuff we know works well for relationships and collaboration and bringing it into a hybrid world. As I said, this is something I'm very interested in working with different organisations on. If you are interested and you would like to have a chat, I'm always interested to hear about what's working for people and what the challenges are. Please drop me a line, connect on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear what you're doing. And there's also a link there if you would like to sign up for my newsletter, where I dig into a lot of these issues in a little bit more depth. So thank you very much.